Right, so in this video I hope to elucidate and shed some light and insight on what could be a particularly controversial topic to some. And really it's in response to a video that I posted on Facebook a while ago, which I will link below in this video. And basically the video is just basically about some radio host, quote, losing his mind over Bill Nye. And the topic that these two people are discussing is the safety of vaccines. And this is a clip from Bill Nye's show called Bill Nye Saves the World. And then the other guy's radio show is called Highwire, it looks like. But anyway, I will link it below, and you can see the video in reference. Now, this is a great example to really expound on some bigger points. And a few people were like, "Oh, you don't tell me you actually believe this," meaning the fact that I would post this video necessarily assumes that I am somehow against vaccines, or that I'm somehow like chosen sides on this battlefield of morality, or this salvational platitude that somehow I'm trying to find myself in the middle of. Or it's like I'm driving down the street and McDonald's is next to Burger King, and which one am I going to select? And depending on which one I select means I'm going to be this type of person. When really the bigger point to that is no one is really seeing how both the people are kind of stupid. And I mean very short-sighted, very narrow in their view, very salvational, very dogmatic. And in some ways also just passionate about what they're doing. But mostly what they're passionate and interested in is their own self-importance, self-righteousness, and the pleasure of, feeling right, etc. Which, it's kind of ironic that Bill Nye's show is literally called Bill Nye Saves the World with Science, because for years I've been making fun of people that get really into science and saying that it's deeply salvational. It's actually not scientific. And then if you trace the history of it back to more of its origins, you can see Christianity's hand in it. And even further, if you take the actual constructs that it's running off of, the actual mechanisms, it's very oftentimes identical to the thing that it's supposed to be an alternative to. So what I mean is that these people are basically engaged in the act, which is supposedly the thing that they are alternative to, thus negating what they're doing and kind of making them a bit impotent. So what does that mean? Well, I will share a story to sort of illustrate a bit of the point of what I'm trying to get at. In the story, let's just say there's a guy. Let's say the guy is like into Chinese philosophy for part of his life. And he gets invited to a dinner. Dinner is a lot of wealthy, well-to-do, middle-aged people, husband and wives, right? So at this dinner, and they're all so well-to-do, and they all have so much money that they have a foundation. They've started this foundation, they started this charity, this organization, to basically, catch child predators, to catch people that basically prey on children in some way, shape, or form via the internet. So through the course of the organization, let's say they've spent $50 to $75 million, and they've caught one person, and the one person actually was never convicted, nothing ever happened of it, but let's just say they spent this amount of money in this huge chunk of their time and energy. So they're talking, having dinner, and they're talking about the problems, they're talking about their organization, how they want to save the world, how they want to do all these things. And they ask the guy, they're like, "So, you're not really saying anything, you're not really engaged in this conversation, like, what do you think about all this?" And the guy says, "Well, where are your kids right now?" And they're all like, "Oh, our kids are fine. They're at home with the sitter." Like, "Oh, what time is it right now?" "Oh, it's almost actually 11 p.m. Okay. How often would you say that you are away from your children throughout a huge chunk of the evening and leaving them alone with a person that you're paying money to that maybe you don't really know very well?" Oh, we do it all the time because we always have to have these dinners to basically, talk about our organization, to basically, so we can try to save the world and do ABC. It's like, okay, so what are your children usually at home doing? Oh, they're on their iPad, they're on their computer, they're doing this, they're doing that. Oh, what's the sitter doing? Oh, usually kind of the same thing. Interesting. So what we have is basically a situation which is setting up and really increasing the probability of the very thing that you're trying to save the world from. And then at that point, they all start to, like, the more they say these things out loud, the more they start to be like, wait a minute. We're trying to help, children be safe from predators on the internet, but we're spending a lot of our time and energy leaving our children alone with strangers. We're having a fairly low rapport with our children. We're not really building a relationship with them. Instead, they're just left with devices and strangers. But yet we've spent $50 to $75 million over the last however many years to prevent these things from happening. But our actual actions in our actual life and our actual family are really just supporting and setting up the circumstances to make the thing that we're trying to rally against even more likely. But we are so self-deluded and so drinking our own Kool-Aid that we don't actually realize and see the connection between the two. Interesting. So that's one example. Let's say another example. We're really mad about being deceived, right? Maybe people in our lives lied to us. Maybe we had a relationship that didn't go the way we expected it to. Maybe we are mad about the state of the world, the media, political manipulation, etc., etc. Very practical and common sort of feeling. But how willing and able are we to see the ways in which we are actively deceiving ourselves and other people, actively and passively? How willing are we to engage upon that process? Might be a good question to ask. So, getting back to the example of the video below, basically, we can fairly see that it would be pretty stupid to say that vaccines have never done anyone any good. Maybe. I don't know. That might be a bit strong of a statement. It also might be a bit strong of a statement to say, you know what? Because maybe they did this good in the past, that means they just must be good throughout all time. So we shouldn't actually look at it. We shouldn't actually study it any further. Which that's actually what people think and believe, because usually the justification is, oh, we got rid of polio, got rid of measles, we got rid of all these things because of vaccines. The world is a safer and better place because of vaccines. May not be true. And just that statement alone, it will often trigger a lot of people emotionally and cause them to freak out. Just like you said, oh, that God you believe in is not real. And they're, oh. So that's really the level of argumentation that people are kind of coming at. When in reality, maybe it was true then, but is it true now? Are we able to see that maybe it could be possible that what people are saying that are critical of vaccines could be true? Maybe there have been side effects. Maybe there are toxic substances within them. Maybe there are heavy metals that go to people's brains. Maybe these things do occur. Wouldn't that be scientific to actually say, oh, let's see what these people are actually saying. See, there might be some truth. Here's why. There might be some falsehoods. Here's why. And then be able to say, oh, now maybe we can actually have a conversation about it. Now maybe we're actually being scientific because we're actually looking at situations, not being dogmatic and religious and assuming that we have the one true way and the light. Because it's not as though science has ever been wrong, really. I mean, the process itself is alive, right? Life is alive, knowledge is evolving, but it's also just like one of those things where I think most people for some reason still believe like circumcision is a thing. Oh, it's like cleaner, right? Oh, okay, well, based on what? Oh, there's studies. Oh, interesting. Okay. Or maybe it just has something to do, connected a lot more with some vague idea of religious purity and some religious ritual that was then integrated and upkept in a society, much in the same way as women not being able to vote for a certain period of time and somehow being believed as inferior and subservient, people of different races not being allowed to vote and having varying degrees of rights. These things generally have their roots in religion. So that doesn't mean there's really anything around it, even though there was a time where people were like, oh, there's science to support this. Just like, in the 50s, people used to really believe that, oh, cigarettes are safe. We have studies. They're totally fine. And then eventually, no. So it's not as if science is good or bad. It's not if going against the norm or the mainstream is good or bad. It kind of really depends. And that's why you kind of actually have to be a little bit smart and be able to think about things. But in our day and age, it's really difficult because if you post, let's just say, a video on Facebook that is critical of the thing, everyone assumes automatically that you are somehow all the things they've been conditioned to believe. Oh, you don't believe 9/11? You don't believe that story? You must be a total whack job. You think maybe aliens are a real thing, or that maybe humans or certain government organizations possess technologies that are outside of our scope? You must be crazy. You think that vaccines might not be totally safe, or that at least there needs to be more research? You must be insane. And it's like, really, I think if we actually lived in a world that wasn't so deeply ignorant and conditioned, we might be able to actually converse about things. But instead, people think about things in basically the formatting of old school Christianity, where as soon as someone says something outside of their conditioned mechanistic responses, they want to burn them at the stake, emotionally, psychologically, and sometimes even physically. And so that's basically saying that, oh, you're trying to be an alternative, you're trying to be all these things, but actually your mental operating system, your psychology, is still just rooted in ancient times. You haven't actually grown up to the point to maybe even hear things or be able to see things. And that's a really interesting facet of our brain, is that it kind of, in a lot of ways, responds to our belief system and our conditioning, so much so that something could be right in front of us and we might never see it. It's like people will watch an advertisement for a pharmaceutical. Maybe the advertisement's 2 minutes long. 20 seconds might be about the drug, and the other 1 minute and however many seconds is about the side effects, which can include death. It can include all these things which are actually worse than the thing that the drug is trying to treat. That, and even that it's been shown that pharmaceutical drugs actually only have an efficacy on average of 5 to 15%, meaning if it's 4 headaches, it's only 5 to 15% out of the time going to actually do anything for the headache, and the rest of the time we're really just fumbling in the dark. And that basically our mainstream medical society a lot of the times is deeply superstitious and not really scientific at all. And again, that's not a complete blanket statement, because there are plenty of people, plenty of things within that world that are legitimately helpful, could be beneficial, can actually help humanity move along. But it's, again, being able to actually think in a bit more of a real way, rather than saying, oh, it must all be good. You said something bad about this thing that I believe is all good, then you're an evil person. For example, I reposted, I should say, an article earlier today that was about Gandhi. Basically just saying that Gandhi had a penchant for sharing a bed with little girls and that he was deeply racist. Both things that have been known for a long time and have never really ever been secretive. And whether that's true or false, I just find it entertaining how people react with this gut emotionality. And even better is assuming that somehow I wrote it, when it's like, it's on Vice. So how did I write it or somehow misconstrue history when it's on Vice and they're referencing other people? And I mean, I've honestly known about that shit for like 10 years. Similar stories about Mother Teresa, similar stories about the Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy. The list goes on, but people don't want to hear it because they're so conditioned to basically put people on a pedestal and think they're somehow higher or better or somehow not subject to being a human being. And it's like, yeah, this person may have said something good or had something good, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not a human being. Like, for example, people think Dalai Lama is like some newfound Jesus character in that somehow, like, yeah, there's a lot of naive assumptions. So then if you say, actually, you know, the Dalai Lama isn't vegetarian, what? But I thought Buddhism was about compassion. And compassion equates to vegetarian. No, I think you made that up. Because a lot of monks are vegetarian because they don't have money. And they only eat what people give them. If they had money and they could eat meat, they probably would. And even a lot of monks aren't vegetarian at all because they don't want to be. But it's like, you're a naive, entitled, modern white person so conditioned by Christianity and Scientism that you're not even aware. It's like I've had conversations with people and they've said literally things like, I thought the Chinese just really had all their religions dialed in. I thought the Chinese just took their religions very seriously. And I'm just like, oh my God. It's just like, if I were like, it's just the blacks are just really good at basketball. It's just the blacks. They just have an extra ligament that makes them more athletic. It's like, that is the most deeply ignorant and stupid, presumptuous, ignorant bullshit. But depending on where I am, it might be totally acceptable. Because where I grew up, you could probably say things like that, and not a lot of people are gonna blink an eye. They're gonna be like, "Oh yeah, totally. That makes total sense." I mean, I was at a qigong workshop one time, and this middle-aged white lady was literally said something. Yeah, it's just the blacks. You know, they just have really strong legs. And then she was like, I was just really surprised that, you know, Michael Jordan had this, like, knee problem. And I'm just like, what? Like, what? So, but we can see that that's, like, obviously absurd and really stupid. But people don't see the same level of stupidity to say, oh, Gandhi was a great person. He wanted to save the world and do this and that. Like, well, Gandhi was a human being, so he's probably generally only interested in his own self. Because if you actually research it for 15 minutes and read around, you would see that he was deeply racist and really didn't like black people and said a lot of really not so nice things. Mother Teresa, she was a saint. She was all the embodiment of heart and compassion and consciousness. When really, they didn't actually help anyone. They would basically take people to their facility, whatever you want to call it, convent, to let them die. They didn't treat them. They didn't help them. They didn't give them any medicine. They just watched them die because she believed that it helped people get closer to God by being close to death. So, I mean, it was, which I mean, cool, you know, it's versus dying alone on the street versus being watched while you're dying by a bunch of strange nuns, which is better, I don't know. I mean, who's to say? But it's just that the story is not so simple, generally speaking. Dalai Lama, you know, is a lama, is an embodiment of compassion. But also, maybe the lamas in Tibet had a majority of their population enslaved, tortured, and maimed for a very long time of their history. Maybe also the Tibetans did some pretty fucked up things to the Chinese and did some pretty messed up things throughout history. And Tibetan Buddhism wasn't always so kind. Maybe Dalai Lama collects Rolexes, he's not a vegetarian. Maybe he spent his life, or a decent chunk of his life, in what was the largest building on the planet. But let's assume that that largest building on the planet that was built in Tibet quite a long time ago probably didn't ring up a contractor and say, hey man, we want to build like this massive temple. Oh, don't worry, we'll be over next week and we'll get that done. I kind of doubt that people were lining up and volunteering to build such a thing. I mean, I don't know. I might just be crazy, just to look at structures that are so massive in a land that has so little resources because it's such a high elevation, such an extreme environment. I can imagine a lot of people being like, "Yeah, we'd really enjoy building all these temples for you guys. Let's do it for free." Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe I could be wrong, but this is just an example of small, limited thinking. And people want to get into, say, conspiracy theories. Well, really, the only conspiracy theory that we really need to concern ourselves with is stupidity. That's really the only one. That's the biggest one that's had the largest impact on the planet for probably the longest period of time, is people just really being stupid. And it is still at play right now because of really the examples that I'm trying to go through and kind of shed some light on. But really, again, it comes back to us in our own lives and choosing to make different decisions for ourselves rather than what is the common trend today. Oh, I'm going to join a movement. I'm going to go to a protest. I'm going to hold a sign. It's like people put these signs up in their yard. Oh, refugees are welcome and this and that and da-da-da-da-da. It's like, I mean, it's cool, right? Like, okay, these things are true. Kindness, openness, acceptance, welcome. But I really question how far that extends. Are they extending these types of virtues to themselves? Maybe, maybe not. Are they extending it to the people they are in a real active way connected with? I don't know. Or is the extreme outer manifestation really an overcompensation for an internal lack? Because it's just like, if you're full, if you're nourished, you don't really feel hungry. You don't feel the need to make a big deal about it. If you just ate a really good, satisfying meal, probably the last thing you're thinking about is like going out and getting another meal, because it just doesn't even register on your consciousness as a thing to do. But if it registers so high as a thing to do, then we might have to say, oh, well, maybe you're hungry. I don't know. Which, there's nothing wrong with that at all. This is our own personal choice. This is what works for us, and this is what we believe in. Great. It's just we have to realize that if we are not actually offering an alternative perspective or any type of solution, what right do we really have? Meaning, if we haven't tended to our own garden, what skill set, what real practicality, what real dexterity, what real proficiency do we have to share with other people? Or are we just merely coming together in a cacophony of our own self-righteousness to make ourselves feel better? But it's like, what are we actively doing in our own lives? For example, I've asked a few of my friends and a few people that I've known that are pretty hardcore, upright feminists. And I'm like, well, if you have a son, are you going to have him circumcised? And they're like, I don't know, it's a good question. I never thought about it. Probably. I'm just like, interesting. So your societal projection and your egoic idea of yourself is all about, equality and compassion and kindness and tolerance. You're going to generally mutilate your own child, which that's literally what it is. Genitals, that's the body part. Mutilation, making it different than it is for generally no reason. It's kind of the definition of the word. So you're doing that to this person that you supposedly love. Okay? But you're all about kindness and compassion and equality and tolerance and yeah, totally, those things are great. Oh, but you don't connect it to your actual life. Meaning, maybe you don't really eat very well. Maybe you do excessive amounts of yoga and undermine the tendons and ligament and the integrity of your tendons and ligaments. And you have this really uptight, rigid, overly masculinized frame. You do all these things to yourself, but you're all about love and compassion and kindness and okay. Right. I get it. But it's just quite common. So, yeah, I think that's probably about enough. Pretty much made a lot of points, I guess. But hopefully it's been helpful. Yeah, and I'll talk to you soon.